Hey everyone. You know, Scientology is not the only destructive cult out there. It's been said that because of its litany of mind control techniques and the insidious way it takes over every aspect of your life, Scientology is one of the worst. However, that's a highly subjective statement, and after you hear my interview with cult survivor Christiana Miner in this video, I think you'll see that there is no reason to try to judge which of these destructive cults are worse than any others. After all, they are called destructive cults for a reason. They ruin people's ability to think rationally, destroy their emotional stability, and often swindle them out of thousands or even millions of dollars in the process. I met Christiana recently here in Colorado and was impressed by the struggle she went through growing up in the Quiverfull movement. This was not something I had heard of before and found out it's a relatively recent creation and is not a centralized cult movement with only one leader who demands loyalty and submission from his followers. No, instead, this is a Christian-based philosophy centered around the idea that children are a blessing from God. However, looking deeper into this, I found out that the Quiverfull movement is associated with some other teachings that are anything but a blessing. The term quiverful comes from a biblical passage, Psalms 127:5. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. How blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be ashamed when they speak with their enemies in the gate. There's certainly nothing wrong with being fruitful and multiplying if you have the time and resources to properly care for your family and give each child a loving home. However, it's in dealing with the problems of child rearing and education that some parents have turned to people whose methods and philosophies are nothing short of child abuse, and which give the fathers of these quiverful children a do-it-yourself kit to turning their families into destructive cult units. One such person is Bill Gothard, another is Michael Pearl, both of whom are talked about in this interview. Before getting on to Christiana, I want to give you a little background on who Bill Gothard is. Gothard was born in 1934. He graduated with a master's in Christian education in 1961, and that same year founded an organization called Campus Teams. This was changed in 1974 to the Institute in Basic Youth Conflicts and was changed yet again in 1989 to the Institute in Basic Life Principles. These groups gave seminars and workshops directed and authored by Gothard on his ideas of what a God-fearing and Bible-based family should be and how it should conduct itself. These seminars were attended by as many as 10,000 people at a time during their heyday in the 1970s. But he's kept going strong all the way to the present. In fact, this movement had a shot in the arm when the Duggar family got their own reality show on TLC in 2008. The Duggars are strong supporters of Gothard's methods and have even done presentations at his seminars. Gothard's methods and preachings incorporate not only a quiverful approach to family planning, but also calls for biblical patriarchy. This is where the husband/father is viewed as standing just below God, and whose every word is a sort of divine command which is to be unquestioningly followed by his wife and children. Failure to comply results in psychological, emotional, and physical discipline until the family learns to follow orders without question. One of Duggar's children, Josh, was exposed in the media in May 2015 for sexually molesting 4 of his sisters while still a minor himself. I won't rehash all the details of that scandal, except to point out that Jim Bob Duggar's actions in handling this were inexcusably bad, and objectively speaking were not in accord with the law or anything resembling common sense. However, his actions were totally in alignment with Gothard's teachings and how he recommends sexual abuse be handled within families. That should tell you something about just how much value those teachings actually have in the real world. So without further ado, here is Christiana. So you were involved in the Quiverful movement?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. In fact, you were raised into it.
I was raised into it, yep.
All right. So first off, I think people need to know, what is that?
Basically, the Quiverful movement is about families being strong in the Lord, being strong in their faith, and raising up the Lord's army. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Lord's Army. That's
yeah, there's actually a song about it.
Really?
I could sing it, actually. if you want.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really short. It goes, as arrows in the hands of a mighty man, so are children to their fathers, fitted so that we can storm the enemy, God's mighty host of sons and daughters.
Wow.
That's still ingrained in my mind.
I see, with the hand movements and everything.
With the movements and everything, yep.
Wow.
Yep,
okay.
But it's about trusting that God will provide for all the children you have and having as many as your faith will allow. So it's just being very, very strong in faith and having as many kids as possible.
Interesting, interesting. I was interested in looking this up and researching it to find out Quiverfull really, really is at its heart just about having children and not having any birth control, no abortion, no restrictions of any kind, no practice.
It shows lack of faith. So
right, right. If you try to do that, if you try to put any control or restraint on birth control,
just letting God's work happen.
That's right. Even natural forms of child control, like watching when you're, having intercourse, what time of the month it is,
cycle
all that.
On it, yep.
Even that is just nope. You just make hay. So I found that interesting. To be an interesting philosophy, and it's apparently based on the Bible. Is that right? Like what? How does this?
Be fruitful and multiply.
Right.
That's what it's about.
Right. Okay, got it. Good. And this idea actually comes. It's an old idea. It's not particularly unique to just the Quiverfull movement to be fruitful and multiply.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
But these guys are taking it and
then run with it, basically. Yeah.
All right. So how did this connect for your family with the concept of biblical patriarchy? Because that's also a very closely tied in concept with many of the Quiverfull families.
Well, my family got all mixed up in both Quiverfull and patriarchy, biblical patriarchy, and fundamentalism, all in one nice group that made it nice and easy to get involved in all that.
Okay.
Yeah, we got involved in Bill Gothard's Institute of Basic Life Principles and his homeschooling program, the Advanced Training Institute. And a lot of those same beliefs and lifestyles are just kind of embedded in that society, really.
Cool.
Yeah, a lot of the families practiced Quiverfull or were involved in the Quiverfull movement, and they were practicing following that biblical patriarchy system because the father is the absolute head of the household, and it was him that God bestowed authority upon.
How was it that your family got involved with Bill Gothard in the first place? How did that happen?
A big downward spiral, in a way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I started out pretty regular. My family was fairly conservative, very Christian. We went to church every Sunday. We're very involved. And I grew up, well, not grew up, because I just went to public school from, I think, kindergarten to second grade. And then after that, my parents decided to homeschool. So I started being homeschooled in second grade. My sister, who was after me, was just a couple years younger than me, so I was really the guinea pig, the first one to get involved in all this. And then a few years into that, we got involved into a local Christian homeschooling group, and it was actually pretty neat. A lot of the different parents would get together and each would teach lessons and classes to all the other kids in the group depending on their own expertise. So I got involved in drama class, I had gym class in a way, of course home ec, all this stuff. And that was pretty fun. But then it wasn't conservative enough for my family. My family just kind of fell out of love with that group. And we started going to these seminars held by Bill Gothard. And he has a basic seminar, an advanced seminar, and a children's institute. And the song I just sang came from the Children's Institute. I went for a few years.
So this wasn't just seminars for your parents. You were going.
Yeah, they had them for all ages. Yep, and we all got pulled into it. And that was kind of his cultic group light. It was how he got people to come in, because they were very popular seminars. I mean, thousands and thousands of people would go to them, and we were like, they would be held in big auditoriums, and they'd be full to capacity, and there'd just be hundreds of other kids there at the kids seminars. And when I graduated to the basic seminar, I mean, there was just thousands of people.
Wow.
And they were held all across the country. And a lot of, pastors would go and get their congregations to check him out because, oh man, this guy, he had a lot of good ideas and was on fire for the Lord.
Okay, and so Bill Gothard then was combining these concepts of Quiverfull and be fruitful and multiply with the patriarchy.
In a way, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. These seminars are what first got us in, and then once he suckered you into homeschooling your kids using his specialized curriculum, that's when the really weird teachings started coming out.
Now, this is fascinating. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is very, very fascinating. All right, so I'm going to take a wild guess here that your parents had to pay for these?
Oh, of course. Yes.
Of course.
Yep, every year.
Seminars and the school materials. And
yeah, there were regional seminars, there were national conferences. I think we only got to go once, but it was a thing that was a great point of pride for people to go. And I believe I haven't actually watched them myself, but the Duggars on TV, like they show their family van with like signs saying ATI or bust, because they were headed to national seminar.
Oh, is that what ATI is?
The Advanced Training Institute is the homeschooling component of Bill Gothard's Institute of Basic Life Principles.
Okay, so this is how the Duggars get away with not saying they're Quiverfull, because they deny on their website that they're Quiverfull. They just say they're fundamentalist Christians who follow the Bible, which
states be fruitful and multiply.
Right.
And they're involved in all these groups that really strongly support. I mean, my family had 6 kids, and that was small.
Right.
All my friends,
wow,
there were 8 kids, 10 kids, 12 kids in their families, and that was normal for us.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you grew up around very big families. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, of course, my parents came from big families, both my mother and my father, Christian Catholic families, Midwest, back from the 50s, 40s and 50s,
yeah.
Baby boomer generation and that sort of thing. But this is a different thing from that.
Okay.
This is, because what we're talking about with this group is large families because the Bible tells you.
Yeah.
And you're literally on
it's
this
part
crusade.
Of your Christian duty.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You're on a crusade to make soldiers for God.
Yep. It's scary. It really is.
It does have ominous overtones to it.
Yeah, because not only are these families having giant kids, but they're raising them in a very insulated environment where they're homeschooling them, and they're very controlling as to what kind of outside influences are allowed. So
let's talk about that, because I knew this was going to come up, right? The Duggars have it's been made known through their experience that the daughters control. The story I'm told is, the daughters run ahead and alert the sons, if they're out in a public mall or something, that, maybe some woman's approaching who's scantily clad and they have to avert their eyes. And what was your experience with that?
It's the same mindset all across. What I'm wearing now wouldn't be appropriate at all because my skirt doesn't cover my knees when I sit down. And my collarbone is showing, that kind of thing. It's not allowed. The patterns on my skirt, they're called eye traps. There's a whole thing about how loud patterns are just, they're drawing your eyes to some part of the body you're not supposed to. Everything a woman is supposed to wear is supposed to draw you to her countenance. Is the principle of it. And so when my family would be driving around, just going out grocery shopping, going to visit family, all of a sudden our dad would say, "Kids, look down." Or mom would say, "Oh, close your eyes." It's because a billboard would be approaching as we go down the highway that had a woman on it that wasn't quite up to our standards of modesty.
Wow.
Yeah.
So your parents controlled that, and then they indoctrinated you guys into controlling yourselves in regards to this, or controlling each other?
We were vigilant, that's for sure, for each other. You got a bunch of siblings. It would be like, I'm going to tell Mom that you didn't close your eyes when they were kissing in the movie, kind of thing. That's a spot-on impression of my little siblings, by the way.
How else did this manifest while you were growing up? What other systems of... I'm very interested in what other systems of control or indoctrination were used, because this hit you early on. In second grade, your family starts getting involved in this.
We weren't involved in Bill Gothard's cult until I was about 12. But at the years in between, we got slowly more and more conservative. I mean, I have a few pictures of me as a little kid, still allowed to wear pants, but that wasn't so much a thing later. It was all long skirts. The music we listened to was very controlled. Anything with a repetitive beat was considered of Satan, because it's that African rock beat that you're calling up demons, and I don't know. And so it would get to the point where if we heard it coming, you're just out and about shopping and you hear, just pop music, it's getting piped overhead and everything. I knew kids who had agreed with their parents that they would cover their ears anytime anything ungodly came on. We had to mute things during movies, or, we were lucky we were allowed to watch movies, but if the music was bad, mute it, or during commercials, that kind of thing. I know of families who they'd go out to eat at restaurants and they would talk to management and say, excuse me, this radio station you're playing right now, that's against our convictions, you need to change it. And it was a way for them to, even out and about in the world, to keep the family insulated against the evil influence of Satan.
Right.
And also let their light shine, because they're letting people know, this music you're listening to, it's worse than you think. It's dangerous.
Right. So it's not just a matter of being isolated or insular. It's actually their effort at controlling their environment to maybe get other people drawn into their world.
Yeah, just kind of showing here, these are our standards, and what is it? By your light they shall know him, or something.
Wow.
It's been a little while since I've read them.
Hey, that's all good. How did the patriarchy manifest itself in your home?
Dad was the head of the household.
And was that way your entire life? Or did this...
It got
the father figure is
and
always
yeah.
the father, but obviously a family unit has a father and a mother, and the father's usually the disciplinarian, while the mother's usually the one who you can talk to, and just to be totally stereotypical.
Yeah.
But the patriarchy is a whole different thing, because it puts the concept in place that there's God and then there's Dad. Mm-hmm. And everything Dad says is basically like the Word of God. Mm-hmm. How did that manifest in your house?
Dad was basically the mouthpiece of God, as you said. We were taught that our authority, like biblical God-given authority, it was called. Dad is this protective umbrella to keep us from the fiery darts of Satan. And under him is Mom, who is also an authority, but has to submit herself to Dad. And then under both of their umbrellas, kids are kept safe. But you step out of line, you step out of that protective umbrella, and who knows what kind of horrible things you would be subject to. A lot of people say, yeah, my parents were strict. My parents were more than strict. They were very controlling. My whole life was between being homeschooled at home, practicing piano at home, and then serving in the church. That was pretty much it. I think I had a couple friends. I can count on one hand how many friends I had in the neighborhood. But everything was about serving at home, being a good little, soldier for Christ at home, and also at church, and that was it. There was a lot of you have to be a witness, you have to be an example. the Bill Gothard's whole thing, like the Children's Institute, we were taught how to smile, how to raise our hands. You have to at least have 3 teeth showing. You could only raise your hand like this. None of this, oh, teacher, pick me crap. It's, okay, sit quietly and do this, you know.
That is fascinating. We're talking about some real control here.
Uh-huh.
And of course, we can't forget you were homeschooled, so you did not have a social life like...
I didn't have anything to measure my experience against.
No, of course not. Of course not. That's why I'm stressing looking back on the experience now, because you only have, you know, the education and experience you've had in the real world since leaving that environment to compare it to.
Yep.
I imagine at the time it seemed like this was the normal way that people should be living.
It was my normal, and it was how we were raised to think, you know, everybody should be doing this. At least other Christians, if they were real Christians and really loved Jesus, they would be doing this.
So did you ever rail against it in any way, or feel that while you were growing up that maybe something was off with what was happening?
I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker, because it's all I knew. I know I was never truly happy growing up. I mean, there were happy moments. There's a lot of really good memories I have, mostly just with me hanging out with my siblings. Like today, we get along pretty well. We enjoy each other's company. We have a lot of the same tastes in music and books and movies and stuff. But that childhood was not happy. My parents were abusive from ever since I can remember, in a lot of different ways. And I feel like their authoritarian mindset is what drew them towards Quiverfull and the Advanced Training Institute and the Institute of Basic Life Principles and that whole lifestyle, because it gave them all the control they wanted.
I think that's a very important point, and it speaks to a larger belief that I have that religion or control groups like this, high control groups like this, draw people to them who already have an inclination or tendency in that direction. This, you know, you have people who are inclined toward authoritarianism, like you just mentioned. They're drawn like a magnet to a high control group like this that tells them you are blessed by God for feeling the way you feel. But please be a tyrant toward your children, because that's the best possible thing that God would want you to do. You know, unfortunately, the children have no choice.
No.
You're not drawn to it.
No.
You know.
Oh God, no.
And as individuals, you know, if you had a choice in the matter, if you could make an informed decision about your involvement in it, you'd be, no, I'd really rather not do this. And that's where I feel the victimization comes in. Would you be willing to share anything else about the abusive environment that you experienced as a child?
Quiverfull is not just about having as many kids as you want, and I'm not going to say that everybody with a lot of kids is mean and abusive towards their kids, because they're not. I know a lot of families that weren't, but there is a couple, Michael and Debbie Pearl. They wrote a book called Train Up Your Child, and that was like second to the Bible in our household.
The mother needs to understand, if she takes away her husband's authority, even by a face, even by making a pitiful look appeal to her husband, she is taking away all authority from that child's life. If that child is going to have authority, mother, you got to let that man be the authority.
Punish him with the rod severely. That's what you do to screamers around here. And if you have fun, it'll be a lot easier training. Feel like a winner. You get 5 licks for being mean. You get 5 more for lying. You're going to see who's lying. I'm going to get this rod. If he screams too hard with the first 5, gets hysterical, wait. You know, a little psychological terror is sometimes more effective than the pain. Thumping him on the head, you're worried about that? Give me another question. We talked about that. Carry him home and train him. Give me another one.
How do father who will not take his part in discipline. When he does discipline, it's out of anger.
Make love to him. If your husband is an angry man, make love. Get rid of his frustration. Make him happy. Because it's the man who determines the course of the house. So I give him 5 more. So now get up. Still got a bad attitude. Get up. I'm going to say, you're still crying. I'm going to give you something to cry about.
It's all about breaking the child's will and molding them into who you think God wants them to be. And so involved in that is just, it's physical abuse, it's emotional abuse, it's psychological abuse, and it's basically about making that child do what you want them to do. Michael and Debbie Pearl talk about, have you ever heard of blanket training? A baby is placed on a blanket, and parents will try to entice them off the blanket by, waving keys, favorite toy, whatever. And if that child sets, one toe off the edge of that blanket, yeah. And that trains a kid, don't leave this blanket, don't you dare. And it's that mindset that colors everything. When the kid's older, don't question, don't leave these borders, don't you dare.
Even when the parents are the one enticing the child.
Sick, I told ya.
That is beyond sick. That is a psychological manipulation that could make a person insane. I mean, I'm not a clinical therapist, but my understanding of psychology,
you know enough that it's wrong.
I know enough about how insanity is made from my own experiences to know that that is, it goes beyond mixed messages.
You teach a kid that following their own desires, taking initiative on their own, is wrong if they don't have permission to do it. And the thing about these movements and these groups is that you never outgrow it, because Jesus was 33 and he still followed his Father's commandments. So, I mean, especially for girls, I think until ownership is passed from father to, her husband, and she's handed over, it's just you're a commodity. You are another little soldier for Christ who has been molded by the parents to follow orders. The same control happens when you're older, because the only form of discipline that they know is just keep hitting until you break that kid's will. Just keep it going as long as you can. Prove to them that you're bigger and stronger than them is, I think it's a direct quote from Michael Pearl in his book, Train Up a Child. Just show them that you're bigger and stronger and keep hitting until they break. And so that was, we got hit for a lot of stuff growing up.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. Any sort of infraction or breaking of the rules of the household sort of thing? Yeah. And if, mom or dad were in a bad mood, that kind of thing, it's just easier to take your frustrations out, I think, on the helpless people who were conveniently right there. Fair enough. Yeah. How did this physical abuse tie in with enforcing a belief system on you? Were those things tied together in any way? It makes you fear to question or rebel, that's for sure. Especially when
your mom's favorite Bible verse is, for a kid to rebel is the same as witchcraft. And it's just, okay, so rebellion is, death, basically. So it was that fear and that mindset that keeps you in line pretty effectively.
I get it. I get it. All right. What was your position in the family? Which child number were you?
Number 1.
So you were the oldest?
I was the oldest. I was
right.
second mommy since I was about 9 years old, I think. There's 6 of us total. There's kind of a big gap between me and the sister after me. There's like 4.5 years there, but then every 2 years or so, I think, I'll have to recount, I always forget. But about every 2 years, another, sibling would arrive. And I was the oldest. A lot of responsibility on my shoulders. The Quiverfull movement is pretty brutal for the oldest daughters because they're expected to help raise the younger siblings. It's just the way it goes. And so I'd be, in high school trying to teach myself biology. I'd be, just told, okay, these are the chapters you read in this textbook, and I'd be trying to learn it. And then I'd get interruptions. Oh, you have to change, your little brother's diaper. You got to go start lunch for everybody. And that was how I struggled through high school, trying to teach myself and run a household at the same time.
What did your siblings ever come to you for sympathy or support if in those abusive situations?
In a way, we would try to solve problems on our own before bringing them to the attention of our parents, because bringing it to their attention usually made the situation worse. So, I'm ashamed to say sometimes I was a disciplinarian. I was never as brutal as my parents. Sometimes it was like, I told you to help me put away the dishes, a little swat or something. Maybe is a different version of that story in my siblings' minds and their memories. But we basically learned to have to take care of ourselves. At least that's how it was from my viewpoint. I couldn't go to my parents for any help, for anything. It was tough, for sure.
I imagine. And there's certainly no judgment here. You were raised in this environment.
That's all I knew.
So, yeah, I'm tracking on that.
Yeah.
It's not the same. It is impossible to, or at least it seems to me morally impossible, to put the same kind of judgment factor on a child who is raised in an environment where they have given no choice whatsoever as to how they are to believe, what they're to believe, how they're to act, versus the parents who 100% had a choice as to whether they were or how they were going to live their lives. So it's black and white.
It's different. Now with my daughter, I wouldn't lay a finger on her.
Right.
Yeah. And for her, timeout is the worst possible thing that could ever happen to anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any other points you'd like to mention in regards to your upbringing and the influence of Quiverfull or the patriarchy or any other aspect of Gothard's teachings or Pearl's teachings?
It's being human, but trying to live up to these impossible standards. Because when you would go to the conferences and everything, everybody would be dressed in their navy and white. We called ourselves penguins. Like that was the formal attire that we were supposed to wear at all the conferences and training centers and everything. And everybody had their 3-tooth smile and they're like, hey, how you doing? Handshake. But at home, it felt like a battlefield. You're just, I remember I just always felt on edge. I never had any privacy, really. And there was no real way to escape that because the world is evil, home is terrible, home hurts. Home is full of tension. Where are you supposed to go?
How often were you guys going to these Gothard's seminars and workshops?
The organization was going through some kind of a transition, I think, during my time of growing up in there, where they were going towards more regional, like in-home conferences where we would just get together with a couple other families and we'd have the videos and we'd do that. I think, it was just a little more intimate and cozy and homey and everything. But I remember going several different times. Not every year, but every couple years, we'd be going to these seminars and collaborating with other families and reminding ourselves what it was that Bill Gothard was teaching us.
Well, that's the point, is keeping the indoctrination fresh. And so I'm wondering if how often were these little intimate family get-togethers with videos? What was that about? How often did that happen?
Well, I think it was preferred you did them every year or so. I only remember doing them maybe once or twice, because we joined when I was about 12, and then I didn't go to any more of these things when I turned 18. So for me, it was a very destructive influence on my life, and I was only there for 6 years. There was a lot of people that were born into this.
And your siblings, of course.
A lot of them were born into it. Yeah.
Are your parents still involved in this?
Yes.
All right. Are any of your siblings still at home?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry to hear that.
Me too.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you escape from this? The whole system is set up in such a way that your property, you're considered, as a woman, your property. How to be passed from the father to your husband.
Yeah.
How did you manage to escape this situation?
I got a college education, and that was not really supported in the cultic circles that I grew up in. Bill Gothard teaches that higher education is unnecessary. All you need is your character to show. Can you imagine writing that he had, I think, 49 character qualities? Just, put that list down and hand that over as your resume. That's totally going to land you a job, right? But I was lucky in that my parents told me, well, what if your future husband dies and you're left to support the kids? You need a backup plan.
Your parents actually initiated that idea.
They valued education more than Bill Gothard, and I think that was my salvation of sorts, because I was able to choose my major. I went to a real school. The ATI, the IBLP, they had their own college of sorts, which was not really...
I'm sorry, can you, the ATI BP,
IBLP, sorry, the Institute of Basic Life Principles. It's a really long name, so there's a lot of acronyms involved here.
I'm from Scientology. I definitely understand acronyms.
What is it about cults and acronyms?
Yes, exactly. But yes, please, what is that? What is that institute you're talking about?
The Institute of Basic Life Principles.
Yeah.
Was founded by Bill Gothard in the 70s. And back then he worked with, I believe, inner city youth. And so it was formerly called the Institute of Basic Youth Conflicts. And he just had this moment and thought, I know how to fix everybody's life. And all you need are these 7 basic principles. And he based an organization on that. He based a homeschool curriculum on that. He based his seminars on that. Design, authority, responsibility, suffering, ownership, freedom, and identification. And of course, he has his own definitions of what all these words are. Like for design, God has precise purposes for each person, object, and relationship which he established. Only as we understand and follow these will we find our identity and fulfillment in life. Authority, this is the big one. God has established a structure of authority and a balance of power. He has also ordained that with proper attitudes and wise appeals, those under authority can have far-reaching influence. Responsibility. God holds us personally responsible for every one of our words, thoughts, actions, attitudes, and motives. Therefore, whenever we sin, there must be confession and proper restitution. For kids, that confession is to their parents. I guess they're kind of like the mini pope of the house or something. I don't know. Suffering. God has ordained that we receive grace for personal cleansing, growth, and achievement by learning how to properly respond to those who offend us. That gets pretty twisted later. I have another handout that's also part of this seminar about how to counsel sexual abuse victims. There's only 12 steps, and it's not until step 6 that they talk about if the victim is not at fault. Then they have to go through these steps of, responding properly to their offender and putting their life and body back under God's control, and it's very victim blaming. It's very scary. 5, ownership. God allows us to conquer anger and worry as we acknowledge that all we have is from Him and belongs to Him. Based on this, we must yield our personal rights and expectations to God. This is what keeps people under control, because you're not allowed to be angry. And if you are angry, it's a personal failing. And you gotta, yield your own rights, and you gotta talk to those in authority and apologize for being a person. Number 6, freedom. Godly freedom is not the right to do what we want, but the power to do what we ought. The freedom which God designed in morals and finances is to allow us to serve others in love. And identification. God conquered the world, the flesh, and the devil through the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. As we engraft Scripture into our soul and renew our mind with these truths day and night, we enter into His power and live above the law of sin. And the way Bill Gothard proposed doing that is memorizing huge chunks of the Bible. Like, I used to have chapters, whole books of the Bible memorized.
Really?
And, yes. And we were supposed to just think on them and think on them and think on them.
That is a very important destructive cult control method that is used not just in Bill Gothard's
I'm sure.
Methodology.
Yeah.
That was very much part of Scientology.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. If I remember correctly, Bill Gothard credits this part, this memorization and meditation on Scripture, he calls it, as the key to success, because it helps him academically, and it just, knowing God's Word so well, you just have to be successful. It's magic. It's a magic spell book. That's what it is.
So this is this is actually very, very interesting, because I'm changing my mind here a bit about some of what we were going to be talking about, only because I did not realize the influence of this individual, Bill Gothard, on your life and the life of others, or that he had this high control system of indoctrination going on into your family. I was under the impression that it was Quiverfull only, and I just didn't get it. It's not any failing on your part. I just didn't understand.
And there's a lot of overlap. I mean, like the Duggars, they're the most famous Quiverfull family there is, thanks to reality TV. Thank you, TLC. But they follow Bill Gothard's curriculum and went to his seminars. They've presented at his seminars before.
That explains so much.
Like they're our mascot. Just like Scientology has its own mascot.
Tom Cruise.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So Gothard proposes a system that is quiverful, patriarchal, and then he puts his own high control methods in.
Oh yeah, and he would hate all those words. And a lot of the people that are in that system will hate all those words, but the beliefs and the lifestyle are there for sure. The teachings are there.
Right.
Yeah.
And they'll claim that it's all Bible based. Mm-hmm. But in fact, what he's done, you mentioned this 1,000,000-page handbook.
It's his interpretation, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, his interpretation is the only right one.
He calls it a new way of life. That was the tagline of the Institute of Basic Life Principles and the Advanced Training Institute and everything. It was a new way of life. And it was supposed to be full of these bright-eyed, bushy-tailed young people who were going to take the world over for Christ.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So out of all of the horrible things that happened to you during those 6 years that Gothard's influence was, over your family, you yet managed to get away because your parents managed to hold on to this idea that education was important.
Yep.
I gotta say, that is a real stroke of luck.
I was very lucky in that way, absolutely, because a lot of the people I knew, they weren't allowed to go to college. They're trying to now, but it's so much harder when they're estranged from their parents and you need a parent's signature for, financial aid, that kind of thing. They never had a high school diploma. How are they gonna, now they have their, older in their adult years, and they're trying to navigate, GEDs and getting financial aid for college and doing all this stuff on their own now, when it should have been years ago that it was taken care of. Or they were allowed to go to college, but only to an approved one. Like Bill Gothard had his own college. I believe it was called Verity. I almost went. Verity
Talk
College.
about out of the frying pan into the fire.
Yeah, it was a very highly controlled environment. From what I've known, I've been told that women who go to this college had to take mandatory home ec classes at the supposedly collegiate level. And basically, yeah, because knowledge and education is a direct threat to everything. And so you need a safe environment to get that education. And Bill Gothard magically provides this safe environment where you have curfew at 8, except on Saturdays when it's 9. And you basically do CLEP test your way out of all these credits so that you come away with a bachelor's degree in 22 months. And that's how they pitched it to the parents of going, you know what, it's a lot cheaper to do it this way. This is a godly environment. They'll be under surveillance the entire time, basically. And it's going to be cheaper, for you because it's only 22 months as opposed to 4 whole years.
Have any of your other siblings reached the age of leaving home?
Mm-hmm.
And have they successfully gotten away from this too?
So far, my one sister has. She's finished with college, and the brother after her is almost done with his.
And they both got to go to the non-Verity college?
So far, yeah.
Also?
And then there's another sister who's in the midst of a college education at a state university. So, a real cesspool of evil.
Well, I'm fascinated by the fact that they allowed them to follow your example.
They found ways to keep control. And again, I can only speak for myself, not my siblings, but I went to college very much brainwashed as to the danger college held for me and my spiritual life, and what I had to do to protect it, and also what would happen if I stepped out of line. Remember the umbrella? If I stepped out from under that umbrella, fiery darts and Satan and everything. Right. So a whole hailstorm of evil. And so, I was required to send daily reports by a certain time of what I did every day back to home. I would get random calls sometimes. I know, my mother called a few times in the middle of the night, woke up my poor roommate, demanding, okay, where are you? Where have you been? I was down the hall doing laundry. Or the worst rebellion was when I was out with a boy getting ice cream. I was literally a block away down from my dorm getting ice cream. And I came back to my dorm and my roommate was awake going, your mother called 1,000,000 times, kept waking me up. And so, they found ways to keep tabs, and, I'm embarrassed. I was just mortified, and for the longest time I couldn't tell anybody what it was really like with my parents, the nature of my relationship with them.
How did you end up breaking free from this in the college environment that you went to? What would you say was the make-break point? Or, was there a specific point where you went, oh, I'm actually done with this now? Did that happen? Or?
Yes, and it was actually that same boy, my now husband.
The ice cream man.
Yeah, He called one night and heard screaming in the background, and it was, I think, a fight, or one of my siblings had done something wrong or something, or my parents screaming at each other. And he was horrified because he had never heard anything like it before. It was pretty bad. And it was kind of that wake-up moment of, you mean this isn't normal? And just the way he treated me was completely different from what I'd been from the treatment I was used to all my life. And about 5 weeks later, we got married. We'd been dating for a couple years already, courting. I'm so sorry. We weren't dating. They're two completely different things. Dating leads to divorce according to this whole mindset, but courting is when, boys' parents talk to girls' parents, and it's kind of this arranged marriage. Everything is heavily surveyed. I had siblings come with me on my little dates and everything with him. But yeah, our relationship was very heavily controlled.
How far away from your home were you when you were going to college?
About a 2.5-hour drive. Okay. So there was some distance, but not a great deal of distance. Okay. So I would, come home on weekends and stuff, and my boyfriend would come visit sometimes, but it was very controlled. And he had to, it was all, asking permission to do this and that. We were told we weren't allowed to touch it all, not even like hold hands or anything. Like everything was very, very controlled.
I was going to ask next about that. How did you follow those precepts and rules? And
I felt like I had to.
Okay.
Yeah. Didn't always, but.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Yeah, being out loosey-goosey out in the college environment where, there are parties happening like every weekend. And
oh, I was too good. I never went to those.
Oh, well, of course. Of course you didn't. I'm just wondering, how long did it take to break down those barriers for you?
Well, after we'd been dating for a couple of years, it just got to the point where he was like, you know what, we can't let you stay there. Like, we have to get out. And I was like, you're right. I finally got to the point of, I can't live like this anymore. This isn't right. Had to get out. And at that point, we were both adults. I had a full-time, well-paying job in my field of choice. And I still wasn't allowed to move out because it was unseemly for a woman to be on her own.
So you graduated from college, and you went back home?
I had an internship in the area, and it did not pay anything. Paid peanuts. And so the only living situation that I could work out was moving back home for the duration of that internship, and then I was offered a job straight out of that internship. And I thought, oh, finally, I can have independence. I can be on my own and have my own life. No. And the brainwashing was still so strong on me that even though I had that full-time job and I was an adult and I could have just walked out and signed a lease and been like, oh, sorry, I'm moving out, that mental block was still in my head where I couldn't do it.
All right.
Because it was disobedience, it was rebellion, and all those horrible words that are just the worst thing you could do.
I'm sure it must not have helped having to go back into that environment.
It was one of the worst years of my life, for sure.
Did they pick right back up on the abuse and the high control methods and everything else?
Not so much the physical, though there was still some, but definitely the psychological abuse, the emotional manipulation, and just, falling back on those same teachings of you can't question us, you can't rebel against us, because we are the mouthpiece of God. How dare you? Right. Yeah.
So what happened when you got this job and you finally fully broke away? How did you do that?
There was about a couple months that I was still living back at home, and during that time, my the boy, he and I decided, you know what? We're going to go for it. We're just going to go for it. And so we got as close to eloping as we could in McLean County, Illinois. There was, you know, a little bit of a waiting period and all that and getting everything together, but about 5-6 weeks later, we got married. And it was courthouse, and I didn't want anyone else there, but we're still at the point where we didn't want to ruffle too many feathers, so it was just us and immediate family and the judge. And it was awesome. It was what we could do at that point with the amount of time we had and the number of resources we had. And 4-minute ceremony later, we were married, and I finally had, you know, me transferred in ownership over to my husband.
That's what it took for your father to give up the control.
In a way, yeah. They still tried to control every once in a while then, but I mean, I finally got to move out. I had my own car. I had, you know, someone else I was supposed to be answering to, according to the Bible, and then a new head of the household.
Did they not realize that he wasn't at all involved in that belief system? Because your husband's not anywhere near any of this, is that right?
I mean, we were both, you know, Christian. And so that was enough, I guess, though a year and a half after we were married, I was still on speaking terms with my parents then, and they were helping us move from one apartment to the other. Just out of the blue, my father goes, "I don't approve of your marriage." I was like, this is like a year and a half too late, okay? It's like, because you weren't supposed to ask for my approval, I was supposed to give it. And so we hadn't crossed off, you know, checked off the right boxes and followed the right hopscotch, you know, path around Candyland to satisfy all the requirements for what a truly biblical, God-fearing marriage was. And so he didn't approve of our marriage.
And what was your response to that?
I didn't know what to say, because it was just out of the blue. And I'm like, what? What am I supposed to do with this information? Am I supposed to, like, divorce out of, you know, just, oh, I'm so sorry, Father, my liege. Let me get divorced for you and try again, you know?
I don't know that response would have been so inappropriate according to his way of thinking.
Divorce is evil too, but I don't know. It was just, you know, another way for their little psychological, you know, manipulation to get in. And yeah, yeah, it was about probably another year or so after that I just cut off communication with my parents, because they still kept trying to control and browbeat and manipulate, even from, you know, a couple 100 miles away. They it was when I got married, I had free access to the internet, and I didn't have to use it to study for stuff because school was over. And somehow I stumbled on these blog posts of people who had grown up similarly to the way I did, or grown up in the Gothardite way of life, and they were questioning it. And it was the first time I'd taken a real hard look at the beliefs I grew up with and thought, oh, this isn't normal. This is pretty twisted.
Okay, so even the whole time then that you had been in college and met your husband to be, and had then graduated college, gone back home.
The brainwashing was strong with this one.
No, I get it. I'm actually just trying to make sure I understand.
Yeah.
So this is
I mean, I was starting to wiggle my way out of that mindset.
Right.
A little bit. I wanted independence. I wanted freedom. But I was too scared to have it because of the spiritual ramifications of making the decisions that I wanted for my own happiness. It really...
You weren't quite ready to get off the blanket.
No, that's a good way to put it. I was still scared.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, I was scared for a while afterwards. It took probably a year or two of processing, really reaching out to other people, comparing stories, comparing experiences, seeing patterns, that it was just like, you know what? This is a destructive cult. We need to do something about it.
Okay, and I want to highlight that because it highlights the need for people who have been in destructive cults to speak out.
Absolutely.
And make their voices heard, because it does matter.
It does
if
help.
you had never seen those things, you could still be under that influence now.
Oh yeah.
So it does matter that people speak out, and that's...
It makes a difference. It does.
And,
It
and
really
now, what are you doing? You know, I found about you because you came to the Secular Hub here in Colorado, and you spoke about your experiences, and I was fascinated by it because I am, because I do what I do. What else do you do, or what else have you done or plan on doing to speak out about this?
Well, what I have done is, in reading those blogs, you kind of, I went on Facebook, actually, and found found people through, it was an ATI, the Advanced Training Institute, Student Survivors. It was a group for them, and some of them were still like, oh, it was nice to grow up this way, and some of them were like, oh, absolutely not. But it was nice to plug in with those people because we were all over the world at that point. But to be able to share and compare stories and then gradually, together as a group, come to that conclusion of this needs to be stopped, that the website Recovering Grace came out. And that became a platform for many, many, many people to come and talk about their stories and reach out to other people and get the name out there for, interested families who are Googling Bill Gothard to say, oh, maybe I should go to this seminar. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should join this homeschooling group. Maybe, what's going on here? Our stories pop up. And eventually, I think it was about 30-ish stories of sexual harassment at various training centers and such that came out directly involving Bill Gothard. He had to step down.
Really?
Yes.
So there is a sort of a happier ending to this thing.
Ish. I mean,
in progress.
Yes, in progress. He stepped down. He's still up to his old tricks. He's starting to cook up something else, a new organization, a new something. I don't know.
Cult leaders are like whack-a-mole that way.
Yeah, but he had to step down, and I mean, it took a few years. When we first got the website up and running, I mean, I was part of that group that got that running a little bit. I wasn't one of the people who oversaw everything and edited and all that, but I did submit my story. And so that was my first time of really talking about what home life was like, living under his teachings, what it was like to grow up the oldest daughter in a Quiverfull household. Bill Gothard's first response was, oh, there are all these people that set up this website and they're talking about me. They're all addicted to porn and rock music, which is the two worst things you could possibly ever listen to or look at or whatever. And so he tried to dismiss it. He sends out newsletters every once in a while to all the families that are involved, and that was part of his newsletter that he sent out. And we were kind of pissed, but we also kind of laughed. It's like, this language sounds so familiar. This is the best you come up with, too? Really? But you can't stop the stories. You can't. And more came rolling out, more and more. Unfortunately, most passed, that statute of limitations, but they're out there. You Google him, you find all these stories. And now I believe that, this is still very new, but I believe that the Institute of Basic Life Principles is getting sued for negligence, something like that. There's a lot of different types of mistreatment that happened at their various training centers. They had like minors in isolation chambers and stuff like that for days on end because, some infraction of the rules and everything. And I spent some time in the training centers, and it was mostly, they're actually some of my best memories of being involved, because I made a lot of friends that way, but I was kind of a wallflower. I didn't make waves, I didn't misbehave, so I didn't get stuck in isolation chambers, isolation rooms, and had nothing but the Bible to read all day and all that. Have to make public apologies to everybody in the building, that kind of thing.
Public apologies for what?
They always had like announcements in the mornings, and so like anytime, I remember like one kid, I think he as a joke went up after breakfast to the microphone and said, "Any announcements? All right, you're dismissed." But he wasn't the one who was supposed to do that, so they stuck him in one of those rooms and and when he was allowed back out, he had to apologize again at the same announcement time, I think.
Right.
But it's little things like that. It's, you think, oh, it's a harmless prank. No, it messes with the system.
Right. What advice would you give for anybody who sees this, who has been involved in either Quiverfull or Bill Gothard's Dogma, or anything similar, that would help them? What message do you think would help them to get free of this?
I mean, the thing that helped me most was looking up information about this organization, and not just their information, which, they've got a lot out there. Look at it, really look at it, but there's a bunch of red flags in there. And then look at the people's stories, because there are people who've gone through the entire program and it's not what it promises. We're not all the bright-eyed beacons of light that Bill Gothard promised we would be.
What? You're kidding.
Yeah, he
doesn't deliver what it promises? I
know.
Can't believe that.
Right, it's not really a new way of life compared to other groups. It's the same thing, just dressed up a little bit different.
Thank you very much.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No, this was good. Thank you.